Ken Klippenstein and Paul Gottinger, however you pronounce that, Paul, I apologize. They're two journalists for the Daily Beast, and they have some new numbers for us when it comes to Donald Trump and the Saudis. Buckle up for this one. Despite campaign promises, arms shipments to Saudis skyrocket under Trump. As a candidate, Trump claimed Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11, but in the first 8 months of 2017, the U.S. has delivered a total of $1.56 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia. Candidate Trump went as far as saying twice in one day in February of 2016 that Saudi Arabia was behind the 9/11 attacks. Behind the 9/11 attacks. During the presidential debates with Hillary Clinton, Trump admonished the Clinton Foundation for receiving contributions from the Saudis, saying, "These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money." Since then, Trump has allowed more than $1 billion worth of arms to be delivered to Saudi Arabia, according to a new analysis of U.S. Census Bureau export data conducted by the Daily Beast. In the first 8 months of 2017, a total of $1.56 billion worth of arms have been delivered from the U.S. to Saudi Arabia. During this period, the U.S. has more than doubled its bombs, missiles, and ammunition deliveries to Saudi Arabia, and nearly doubled the deliveries of armored fighting vehicles like the M1 tank, when compared with the first 8 months of 2016 under the Obama administration. In addition, the Daily Beast found that the Trump administration has shipped Saudi Arabia $561 million in bombs and missiles, $503 million in armored fighting vehicles and parts, and $552 million in parts to maintain military aircraft like Apache gunships, Black Hawk helicopters, and F-15 jets for use in their disastrous war in Yemen. The total value of arms delivered to Saudi in 2017 represents a $70 million increase compared with the same 8-month period in 2016. And now here you go. Here's the results of that. More than 10,000 civilians have been killed in the war in Yemen. 10,000, man. 40,000 more have been wounded. More than 19 million people, which is about 80% of the population, require some form of humanitarian assistance. Saudi Arabia is blockading Yemen, keeping out food, so people are literally starving, keeping out medical aid. There's been a cholera outbreak there. So this is a country that's being cut off and starved. It's happening in front of everybody, and not only is the U.S. not against it, we are actively facilitating it, and we're on the side of the perpetrators. What happened, Donnie boy? What happened? I remember those debates. I remember covering those debates and pointing out, look, man, you can't... Trump's not wrong here when he would call out Hillary and say, here you are, you're pretending to be this feminist. In reality, as I call it, it's McFeminism, when a corporate Democrat tries to pretend to be feminist. And he says, you're taking money from Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia treats women worse than probably any country on the planet. So spare me your bullshit. You're arming this regime. You're propping up this regime. The Clinton Foundation is taking money from this regime. It's a dictatorship. It's a theocracy. Women are forced to cover up. They need guardians. And then you're going to come out here and pretend to be some sort of progressive hero for women. Well, what about the women in Saudi Arabia as you prop up the brutal regime that keeps them oppressed? What about the women, another point, that you bomb, that you supported the bombing of? You couldn't argue against those things because he's right. He's right about Hillary and her role. But he turned out to be the biggest hypocrite on the planet. Because, yes, he did say Saudi Arabia is responsible for 9/11. Saudi Arabia. Now, he is the biggest bitch boy to Saudi Arabia and neocons in the deep state. And that's his actions that prove it. It's not me just saying it. It's his actions that prove it. Breaking records with arms shipments. Another great piece that Ken Klippenstein did was showed the gifts that Saudi Arabia gave Donald Trump. It's just clear pay to play. And this guy has such a big ego and he's such a child that when people give him gifts and they heap praise on him, as the Saudis did, all of a sudden he melts and he says, yo, yes, tremendous. We're on the side of the Saudis. And then look at what else is happening. If you're not serving the Saudis, why the fuck are you blowing up the Iran deal? They want that. They want that. They want that. Neocons who you used to rail against want that. Israel wants that. So you had this alliance. You're destabilizing the Middle East further, and you're doing it because it's their bidding, because they give you gifts. They heap praise on you. You send them weapons. All the while, you used to say they're the #1 exporter of terrorism. They were responsible for 9/11. Look at how terrible they treat women in their country. Now you couldn't give a fuck. So please, shut the fuck up with your, U.S. cares about human rights and democracy and freedom. Then why do we prop up and arm one of the most brutal regimes on the planet right now? And we sit by idly as they starve and destroy Yemen and massacre civilians on purpose. They've bombed schools. They've bombed schools for the blind. They've bombed open-air markets and mosques and hospitals. All the while, we keep giving them weapons, we keep giving them money, and they keep patting little Donnie on the head. So, he's a hypocrite. He's a fucking hypocrite, and he can't answer for this shit. Which is why it's so important the Democrats run somebody principled. Because if you're going to have another fucking clown up there who was in favor all along of arming the Saudis as well, and is in favor of the status quo on foreign policy, then they can't effectively counter-argue with Trump. But if you have somebody who's principled, who really wants to do a realignment, and who really wants to care about human rights, somebody like Bernie Sanders, well, then they can point out Trump's hypocrisy, and Trump's going to he's going to shit the bed because there is no response. He knows he's a hypocrite. He knows he's a fucking hypocrite. You don't fucking talk about how they caused 9/11 and they treat women horribly, and then you start breaking records, sending them arms. They're a Wahhabi Salafist regime. They're a terror regime. You don't talk about how terrible they are, and then you arm them and not realize your own fucking hypocrisy. Step the fuck out of the way. It's time for Justice Democrats to take over, because we are the only wing of the Democratic Party that has credibility to talk about this. Because all our candidates say, no, we're done here. We're done here. We have a rule against arming human rights violators, full stop. Sorry, Israel, no more weapons for you. Sorry, Egypt, sorry, Saudi Arabia, no more weapons for you. We have a rule against arming human rights violators. Pretty simple, right? That's all you got to do. Hey, we have a rule, no arming human rights violators. There you go. There you go, that's it. So, we're principled. He is the world's biggest hypocrite. You need somebody who's principled to point that out, or else it lands on deaf ears. So, justicedemocrats.com/fight. He pretended to be anti-establishment, and then he's acting like the biggest establishment bitch boy on the planet. And now you know it.